We arrived in Sioux Falls on our wedding anniversary. That evening, we headed from our motel to the nearby Granite City Brewery. It was an introduction to the reality that we would be able to find brew pubs almost every place we went. Granite City started in St. Cloud, Minnesota, and was at that time spreading across the Plains states. Our anniversary on the summer solstice in June is the longest day of the year. In the long, late night of the northern plains on June 21st, we watched the sun spread a slanting light over the city's bike path and talked with a group of young women who were out in the town on some sort of celebration. It turned out that they were all nursing students, and all from smaller cities across the plains. Did they like Sioux Falls, we asked? Oh yes, they began telling us in detail. It was growing. It was friendly. Proving their point, they bought us beers when they learned it was our anniversary. It was big enough to have everything, especially with a growing medical community, and small enough to be approachable and easy. It's a big, small town, one of them said. The first but not the last time we heard that. The excitement of the young nurses about the opportunities in the city and their emphasis on the just rightness of Sioux Falls turned out to be no accident. The profound impact of the local circumstances, the farm economy, its position as capital of this part of the prairie, its central location within the continent, were ingredients in the economic strategy that made Sioux Falls work. Every city that is trendy or successful in some way attracts people from someplace else. The biggest, hottest international magnet cities, Los Angeles or San Francisco, New York or Washington, D.C., Boston or Chicago or Miami or Seattle, or whatever you'd add to that list, draw people from around the country and the world. If someone from South Dakota shows up at a research lab in Boston, or a tech team in the Bay Area, or on a TV show in Los Angeles, the standard coastal narrative would be that the person had made it out of the heartland and into the big time. The dominant tone we heard in Sioux Falls was of people who feel that they have made it precisely by getting to the state's biggest city, from the farms or the tiny hamlets where they grew up. The big box malls all around Sioux Falls are a disappointingly familiar part of its look, versus the more homegrown look of its restored and revived downtown. But those malls also symbolize the city's role in the region, which in turn gives so many people there a sense of being in the right place at the right time, of having come to a place rather than just having left wherever they were from. Many people we met, like the nurses that first night, talked about Sioux Falls as occupying a sweet spot, big enough to offer most of what was attractive about very large cities, the shopping, the medical care, the entertainment, and an increasingly rich food and drink life, but small enough to be manageable, inexpensive, and something we often heard, safe. Our first impression of Sioux Falls was dominated by three great features. One was the falls themselves on the Big Sioux River. They are in the center of town, and a dozen years ago they had been crime-ridden and graffiti-covered. As part of a civic cleanup program, they have been surrounded by a polished-seeming Falls Park, an attraction for tourists and a destination for local families. The park's improvement came in parallel with a similar, larger civic effort, the 20-mile bike and walking course that circles the entire town. We didn't realize it at the time, but the falls and the trails are markers for something we'd encounter almost every place we went. Restoration or revival of civic attractions like the falls and creation of bike and walking paths. Deb eventually formulated a law. The mark of a successful city is having a river walk, whether or not there is a river. The second prominent feature, dominating a hill overlooking the falls and the adjoining part of the bike path, is the state penitentiary. We learned that it was the subject of a hoary local joke. Back in the 1880s, when the Dakota Territory was preparing to become two states, the prospective South Dakota state government offered what was then and still is its largest city, Sioux Falls, a choice. Would it prefer to be the home of the state university or of the state pen? The joke was that the penitentiary offered steadier work for the locals, so that is what they chose. The University of South Dakota wound up in the much smaller town of Vermilion, but Sioux Falls now has an assortment of public and private universities. The third major feature, the most evocative of all, is the giant downtown abattoir, generally known as John Morrell's, where thousands of pigs go to their deaths every day. In many parts of the United States, you might complain that it's hard to see the economy anymore. There are too many indistinguishable office blocks, too few old economy structures where real work is done. In downtown Sioux Falls, where the slaughterhouse is an unavoidable visual and aromatic reminder of the realities of the modern food chain, and where it has a distinct social significance as well, you would never say that. In the century plus since John Morrell opened the slaughterhouse in 1909, it has been an arena for wave after wave of ethnic and economic change in this part of America. Eastern Europeans and Germans worked for Morrell during the pre-World War I era of mass immigration. As a high-wage, unionized employer for half a century after that war, despite the physical and psychological hardships of the job, Morrell was part of the road to the middle class for people in the area. People we met at the newspaper or the universities, in the city governments, or in the banks had family stories that began with versions of, "We came to town when my dad got a job with Morrell's." By the 1980s, it was a center of bitter labor strife, which led to a strike and the breaking of the union.